I decided to push back my follow-up video on the situation with the coalition at the moment because I wanted to give the situation a little bit of time to breathe to see if any major changes happen today. And looking at the ungodly amount of drama that we witnessed in Australian politics today, I think it's safe to say that that was a very good decision. So if you are out of the loop, essentially what has happened is that in the aftermath of the absolute thumping that the coalition got in this year's election, the Liberal Party decided that it was going to go for a full-scale review of all of its policies and that it couldn't guarantee that any of its policies taken into this election would still be there by the end of that review. And that really worried the National Party, and they wanted an agreement that previously five, but now 4 key policies were kept in the coalition's agenda. So since they couldn't get a definitive answer, the National Party just decided to quit the coalition entirely instead of going along with this review process and then having to leave the coalition at the end of it if those policies that they wanted weren't supported going forward by the coalition broadly. And that's what we thought was the truth of the matter. But the first dramatic development that happened today is that we've realized this breakup might have been a lot more personal and has been considered for a lot longer than most of us thought. This right here was a letter leaked by, I imagine, a very clever Liberal staffer in the Senate. And this piece of paper here was written 10 days ago, and it is a correspondence from Senator Bridget McKenzie, the leader of the Nationals in the Senate, and it has been sent to Senator Cash, who is the leader of the Liberal Party in the Senate. And it is essentially a very brief but a very direct complaint about the fact that Senator Jacinta Price was able to defect from the National Party to the Liberal Party. The main complaint here is specifically the fact that allowing Senator Price to defect to the Liberals means that the Nationals are reduced to 4 seats, which means that they lose official party status in the Senate. If you have 5 and you have official status as a party in the Senate, you get extra staffers, extra funding, basically makes life easier for you in the Senate. And they lost that when Jacinta was allowed to defect to the Liberals. But what's really interesting is how she ends it right here. Losing party status in the Senate would have significant implications for the National Senate team, as well as the wider coalition. Depending on the outcome of negotiations between our two parties over the coming weeks, the National Senate Party Room will need to consider our position with respect to sitting with the Liberal Party as a coalition in the Senate chamber. Yours sincerely, Bridget McKenzie. To reiterate, this is from May 12th. So this is evidence, and this was confirmed to be legitimate by Bridget McKenzie, who was very upset that it had gotten leaked. But it essentially shows that the Nationals have been playing around with the idea of blowing up the coalition for almost 2 weeks now. And it looks like the first spark was not anything to do with policy, but rather a personal gripe about the fact that Jacinta Price was allowed to defect to the Liberal Party. If that is the case, and this whole breaking the coalition snowballed from the Jacinta Price situation, then I think, interestingly, that is really good news for Susan Lee. The main reason being that Jacinta Price left the National Party for the Liberals, I think most likely purely because Angus Taylor was offering her a deputy leadership role if he won. So assuming that is all true, I'm not saying it is, but it is, just looking at the sequence of events, then Angus Taylor now has that just stain on him that he may have kicked off all this drama and blown up the coalition unintentionally when he tried to snatch Senator Price from the Nationals. So that is that drama. So what happened with the rest of the day? Well, it seems that there was a last-minute insane push to try and save the coalition by a large number of backbenchers in essentially one massive meeting today behind closed doors. The reason for this mad rush meeting today was that both parties, or at least the Nationals definitely, and the Liberals very likely, were going to announce their shadow cabinets today. And if we had gotten to the point where the Nats and the Liberals had separate shadow cabinets, it would be incredibly hard to mend the gap going forward. It would take months, if not upwards of a year, to get things back on track. Because once you have 2 separate shadow cabinets and you want to bring them together into one unified coalition shadow cabinet, some people are going to have to give up their jobs and go back to the backbenchers, which would be a very, very messy set of negotiations. But it does seem that crisis was averted and that shadow cabinet announcements have been pushed back, at least for now, to give the party more time to go back and forth. It seems that what really got things on track and really lowered the temperature in the room was that David Littleproud confirmed that he would no longer be pursuing being able to defy shadow cabinet solidarity. Basically, previously, Littleproud said that, or at least it was reported, that he wanted the Nationals to have the ability to not support coalition policy even if they were in the shadow cabinet, which is completely unusual in a Westminster system. If you are a member of the cabinet or the shadow cabinet, you are expected, if you want to keep your job, to support government or opposition policy no matter what. So with David dropping that point, it seems that negotiations are on a much kinder tone at the moment than they were earlier today and yesterday. And it seems that David Littleproud has gone so far as to send all the Nationals MPs home to their electorates. Basically, he's not going to announce a shadow cabinet if none of his MPs are here. So he's put announcing the National Shadow Cabinet on pause so that they can negotiate a little bit more and try to come to some deal now. So it seems that now negotiations are just over four policies. First, the nuclear issue. The Nats don't want to pursue government funding for it anymore, but they do want the complete ban on nuclear energy in Australia to be lifted. Secondly, they want a $20 billion regional fund going ahead if they ever get into government. They want expanded telecommunications infrastructure in regional areas. And then the final one, they want to pursue breaking up the Coles-Woolworths duopoly over the supermarket industry. Now, regardless of what we think of those policies, these negotiations, can we just appreciate how weird this is? Peter Dutton, to his credit, as much as that hurts me to say, got a shadow cabinet up and running in barely 2 weeks after the 2022 election. In 2025, we are almost 3 weeks post-election, and there is no end in sight to these negotiations whatsoever. It's just that there's no functioning opposition at the moment. And I mean, I'm glad that Labor won. I'm quite happy about that, but as if that's a surprise. But I would still like somebody, somewhere, some organization to be able to critique them if they do things wrong. But the Liberal Party can't even do that because it doesn't know what its policies are. And even if it had them, it has no shadow ministers on a point-by-point basis to attack Labor policies. There's no functioning opposition. Even the Greens, that is a great stand-in for the Greens going ahead, that plant there. Even the Greens have a functional front bench at the moment, and the official opposition of the government doesn't. So where things sit now, there is a temporary pause, a truce in this back and forth, and we won't see either party announce their shadow cabinets for a while until they can talk a little bit more. And look, it's incredibly interesting to look at. It has been a very fun day for people that enjoy watching the drama of politics, but it's also a little bit pathetic and sad because I love Australia. Australia is a fantastic country, and I assume that most of my viewers now being Australian appreciate that and would agree with me there. And I think the Australian people deserve a responsible and a functional opposition. And unfortunately, you just have to call it like it is. That is something that Australia does not have at the moment.